Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I have been doing every Sunday for a while, except the first Sunday of every month, which is Subscriber Sunday, where subscribers can send in photos of things in their yard that they're proud of. If you're interested in sending in photos for that, the email address is right here. Otherwise, these Sundays I reserve for question and answer videos, and you can ask questions, down below, and I will pick from them each week. I had a ton of questions this week. I won't get to probably even half of them, so thank you everybody for participating in this. One thing I want to hit on right from the beginning is we've got a little bit of real cold coming to the south, for the next week or so. It's really not that big of a deal. It's just barely below average, really. We're gonna have nights like 24, 25. So those of you in the north, that's nothing. And it's only a few degrees below our normal. I think our normal at this point is like 31 or 32 is our average low temperature at this point. So it's not that much lower. But if you do have things in containers outside that you haven't had to keep an eye on during the winter, you might want to scoot those things up near the house or put them in the garage. Things that you've bought and maybe not put in the ground yet, maybe you want to protect those during the worst of the night. Put them back outside during the day though. We want to get them thawed out and keep the sun on them and that kind of thing. If you've got things that have come into full flower, and if you have full open flowers on things like camellias and that kind of thing, you might want to throw a sheet over them Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, and take it off in the morning, and that may keep some of those flowers from turning completely brown on you. So, things with open flowers, other things that have gotten a little bit ahead, they're just going to get nipped back a little bit. Some things are capable of coming back around and repeat blooming. A lot of it, maybe it's one shot for the spring. It's, what can we do about it? I've never seen things this far along at this point. I saw a loropetalum. I took photos of loropetalum the other day in absolute full bloom. It's really, really wild for January, but what can we do about it? No big deal. It's not going to really hurt the plants in the long run. Somebody asked me about replanting things if they think they've planted them incorrectly, like they watched one of my videos, maybe they've planted them too deep. They said the plants weren't looking bad right now, and so that might be what I would go by. If they started to look off color or something later, that may be an indication that you want to go and raise them a little bit. Make sure when you plant something too low and then you're mulching twice a year or once a year, sometimes that mulch volcano can accidentally start to happen up on the plant, and so you end up with mulch up on it. So things that are planted flush to the ground, make sure after you mulch you're going back and pulling the mulch back from the stems a little bit each time. And keep an eye, maybe something you keep a closer eye on, but not worry about popping it out of the ground. But if something's going poorly with a plant, I won't hesitate to pop it out of the ground and figure I did something wrong planting it, or maybe it's, the roots are wrapping around in a circle underneath. Something's going on below the ground that I can't see, and I'll pop them up, raise them, add some additional compost to the hole, that kind of thing. Being careful not to mix any of the mulch in when I do that. Pull the mulch way, way back. Any chunky material. Somebody asked me about volunteer crepe myrtles. I've got a crepe myrtle that has lots of volunteers around it. That can happen from several reasons. The seed can come up, but more frequently they're actually root suckers. And any pruning you're doing on top of a crepe myrtle can frequently cause root suckers. Root suckers can also be caused just by plant stress. So if you had like insect problems, aphids, the year before, any kind of stress on the plant can cause it to decide that it needs to grow new trees from its own roots. And so you'll see lots of suckers around the bases of crepe myrtles, like I say, especially ones that have been cut hard at the top, pruned frequently, or have stress issues. You just have to cut them off and go on with life. You're probably going to live with them every year now, and you just once or twice a year, just go and cut them to the ground and don't even think about it. Just you can be done with that job in 5 minutes and not worry about it. Strip off all the ones down at the bottom that you want gone and just be done with it and move on with your day. No big deal. Somebody asked me about perennials coming up and were they going to be hurt by this cold. If you've got stuff that's up and like showing some leaves on them and you think you can cover them the next 3 nights or whatever the coldest of this is, then go for it. Things like hostas, things that are colder, that are hardier in zones 1 or 2 zones colder than you. So I'm in zone 7. A hosta is hardy in zone 4 or 5. those I'm just not going to worry about at all. They're up this much. It's not going to hurt them. The newest, the first few leaves that open in the spring may have a little tinging of brown on them. It's not going to be any big deal. Your bulbs are not going to have a problem with it. They're from Holland, so just don't worry about them. Most of it's going to be totally fine. Your perennial things, the things that die to the ground and come back every year, bloom on new growth. So if they come up and get knocked back, it doesn't matter all that much, because when they put on new growth again, they'll still flower. That's my point in that. So you're still going to get flowers on most of your perennial things because the flowers will be set during the growing season. Okay, somebody asked me, they've seen these videos about winter sowing seeds and wanted to know my opinion of it. Do whatever you want to do. Just make sure you're sowing the right seeds. I talked about this on Wednesday, my Wednesday update video for this yard. I've got the seed rack inside set up, and I'm starting my cool season vegetables now. So that'd be broccoli and cauliflower and lettuce and things like that that can take some cold weather. That's the only thing I'd be starting this early. And so just don't start things that can't be planted in the ground until April. If you do, they can only stay, if you put them in those little milk jugs like I've seen people doing, you're going to put 10 or 12 seeds in that milk jug, then they're going to come up, and then they have to be divided from one another. I actually like to plant in individual cells and trays, just because I don't have to go back and potentially damage the plants just separating them from one another. Since it's 12 weeks before you can put them outside, you're going to have to transplant them several times. So potentially you go from this milk jug with, let's say, 10 plants in it to 1 gallon size containers of plants over the course of 12 weeks that are taking up quite a bit of space. So I just wait till later on things that you can't put out until after the last frost. But things you can put out before the last frost, like I say, like lettuce and cauliflower, broccoli, lots of other things that I'm not thinking of right this minute. Peas would be another example. There's no real reason to start peas from seed. They can just really be done in the ground or in the container or whatever you're going to grow them in. So that's my opinion of it. Just make sure you're doing the right, doing the only early crops right now. Don't plant any flowers and things like that, because those things are not going to, you're going to be living with them for 12 weeks trying to figure out what the heck to do with them. So somebody asked me about, is drip irrigation the best thing to use in a mixed space where you have like established trees and you're planting new plants? Yes, absolutely. It's best to go out and run drip irrigation around your newly planted things. You don't have to run it around the old existing tree. It's going to get that water anyway, trust me. Just run it around your newly planted things, and that is the best way to water, and have it between the soil and the mulch, and that way it's super efficient too. It's just, from an environmental, thinking about our environment perspective, it's much better to have drip irrigation because it puts the water right at the plant roots. You don't have to run it as long. Anytime you're shooting it out in the air, it's going to evaporate while it's in the air, and you're going to lose some of that, and we're going to get runoff from it not being under the mulch already. So yes, somebody asked me, this one I got a little chuckle out of. They were asking me to identify an arborvitae that has turned a little off color in the winter, but it has these beautiful blue cones on it. And I was like, well, blue cone arborvitae, that's what it is. It's blue cone arborvitae. It's one I used to grow at my nursery. It does have these beautiful blue cones on it, real conical, or almost an egg-shaped arborvitae, maybe a little narrower at the base than that description, but it is a nice one, and it's tougher. I tell you what, blue cone arborvitae is definitely tougher than emerald arborvitae. That's what I always knew. Could tell growing them, but that's what that is. Your question answered your question. Somebody asked me if they had planted a red maple 20 feet from the house, and would I move it? It's going to be moved at some point, and so you decide. I don't know how long you're planning on being in that house. I don't know if it's your problem or somebody else's problem, but a red maple 20 feet from the house is eventually a problem. May not be a problem for 20 years, honestly. So ask yourself that question, but sometime in the next 20 to 50 years, that tree is probably too close to your foundation. And if you're not going to be there, and you want to enjoy the tree where it is, that's fine. But somebody will eventually have to remove it, and it gets more expensive to remove or move the longer it sits there. Somebody asked me about, they're going to put rock around their foundation, just decorative pebbles as a bed around their foundation. Their drip line's about 18 inches out from the house. Wanted to know if they should go beyond the drip line, and yes, I think the answer to that is yes. That's the best way to stop erosion around your house. If you don't have gutters, I would probably, if the overhang's 18 inches out, you might go out 24 inches with the rock from the foundation, and that way that water will pour off and hit that rock and not cause any erosion, or even worse, backsplash off the soil onto your rock. So if you only came out 12 inches with the rock and the water came off, it's going to backsplash your mulch and soil onto that rock, and the rock's not going to look very good for very long. Somebody asked me about plants growing slow at first. They had planted some little 1-gallon cryptomeria and they've done almost nothing in the last year. They're definitely going to sit there and almost do nothing the first year. Leafy plants like this loropetalum are more likely to grow in the first year. Conifers definitely rarely put on very much growth in the first year. Sometimes they do if all conditions, everything's ideal. But most of the time, conifers especially are going to sit there for a year and do nothing. And then the second year, they're going to do like 4 inches of growth, 6 inches of growth. And then that third year, they'll start to, especially cryptomeria, will really start to rock and roll and can, put on a couple feet a year after that. Somebody asked me about planting pink mullygrass this time of year. I don't like to plant a lot of grasses in January. Don't like to divide grasses in January. If there was a month you were going to drown them, this would be it. Those of you who are on the West Coast where it's a little drier, this might be a good time while they're dormant for you. I like to see a little new growth on them, or even do it in the summertime, especially in my clay soils. Now, those of you maybe in the sand hills or along the coast in the east may be able to get away with this. But if I divided mullygrass in January in this clay, it's rained 5 of the last 7 days. I'd likely kill several of them. I'd end up dividing one into 4 and only get 2 anyway. So I'll let them break dormancy and be actively growing a little bit before I do it. Let's see. Let's get one more here. Somebody asked me just in general, is there a too wet to plant moment? I don't think so if you have sandy, well-drained soils, but in my clay soils, I'd put up a video planting 3 autumn ivory azaleas, and it literally had rained the last 3 days, and then was raining on me while I was planting those. They were in an elevated space, so I just judged it by that. If it was a flat space that collected water and I knew it was a wet space, I probably would wait until spring or early summer to plant them, plant into that kind of space. But in an elevated, well-drained space where I'm amending the soil and that kind of thing, you're probably okay planting even in the rain like I was doing the other day. So I think that was a good amount of, that's a good amount for this week. Like I say, ask questions down below this video, and if I don't get enough, I'll go back and pull some more from this past week. But thank you very much for watching.